looks like we are live. Sending out the tweet. All right. Well, everybody, welcome to the live stream of An Ocean of Others spoiler-free AMA. I'm a little bit nervous to be doing this, to be honest, because, I am not generally one who speaks impromptu very well. That's why I like writing, is because I can revise and edit and, take the time that I need to figure out how to say things right. As you could probably tell, that's not what this is going to be. Also, I've got to apologize because does this tweet look familiar to you? Hey everybody, I'm opening up this thread to take questions for an AMA video I'll be filming next month. Spoiler-filled AMA next month. So next month. I'll be filming it next month. I sent this out in November. So clearly it was not filmed in December. And now that it's January and I remembered that I have to do this video for my newsletter, that's literally the only reason I remembered it, is because I had it listed as some of the things I had to announce in my January newsletter. And then when I went to write the newsletter, I was like, uh-oh, I forgot to do this. So, yeah, the other part of this is that everybody who asks a question will be entered into a giveaway for a signed copy of An Ocean of Others, my book that is out right now. And, yeah, you'll get some little, like a sticker and a bookmark too. The standard signed copy package. So we'll do a little giveaway at the end of this video, and I'll show you how I do giveaways. I think it's fair, but I'm always up for suggestions. I never know what I'm doing or if I'm doing things wrong. So yeah, should be fun. So I've got 17 questions here lined up for you guys. So yeah, why don't we just jump right in? Question number 1 comes from my friend Jackie at Confusion. I haven't seen that. I want to know what it was like working with your cover artist to bring the vision in your head onto your book cover. Also, is it a specific scene from the book or just a general vibe? Readers probably know this already, but it's sitting at the top of my TBR. Yeah, just to show you how outdated this is, I just heard from Jackie, and she finished the book since asking this question, so she probably already knows the answer to this question. Although maybe not. Yeah. So basically, I'll answer the second part first. Is it a specific scene from the book or just a general vibe? I think my idea was a bad one at first. I actually wanted to have the like a specific scene, but not with the main character. It was going to be like a side character who is very important to the book, but I was like, wait a sec. I was working with Felix, and he was like, all right, so like this is your main character, right? Like, what does he look like? I gave him an idea of what this character would look like, and then I was like, wait a sec, you know what? Let's scrap this. Like, this is a dumb idea. I want to do this scene with a side character. Like, I want to put a side character on my book. Everybody is going to be thinking that this is the main character because, like, it's written in first person, so you hardly ever hear his name said except when other characters are talking to him, and like his pronoun just uses I for most of the time, and like we don't get too much description about what he looks like because like I don't like doing those kind of scenes where it's like, oh, and he looked into a mirror and he saw that his hair was this color and his skin was this color and all that stuff. So yeah, there's very little description of what Grimm looks like in the book. There's enough, I think, for my tastes. But I was kind of going for like the sort of like Halo Master Chief thing where like, it's a first-person video game. This is a first-person book. You never see what Master Chief looks like under the helmet. So I was like, that makes it so you can just imagine yourself in this scenario, and that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted it to be like obviously this is a character, but you can sort of like put yourself in their shoes more easily because you can almost see yourself in them. I don't know if that makes any sense, but the specific scene is it is a specific scene from the book, but it kind of has my character there instead of the character who takes place there, or like who's really in that scene. Um, and then I added the little, where is it? The little ghost written note there, blue, because I was like, you know what, there's magic. I feel like it'll add some intrigue, and I think someone actually told me that they were intrigued by that specific thing. So I think that was a good decision. But yeah, so sort of a specific scene, but not with the right character, if that makes any sense. Although my character was there at that event, you just don't see it through his eyes. Uh, this is all very confusing if you've never read the book, because it's all one person's POV, but you also get sort of like little snippets of other characters' POV, but they're also in first person. It's confusing. I don't know why I did it this way, but I'm really happy with how it came out in the end. As for the first part of the question, what was it like working with your cover artist, Felix Ortiz, to bring the vision in your head onto the book cover? So, yeah, Felix is great. I was kind of worried reaching out to him that he would basically just be like, "Who are you? Like, you don't have any presence here. Like, why would I work with you?" I'm just like, I expected him to be like someone who would only work with like established artists, but Felix was actually like such a cool guy. He like responded almost immediately, super chill, and he was like, yeah, like when do you want to do this? Like, we'll just get you on the schedule. And we set that date, and it was a couple months out because he's a busy guy. And after that, we just kind of went back and forth. I gave him a couple different ideas. He tried one of them. It didn't end up working. He couldn't get it to work right. So we went back to this idea that I talked about too long. And yeah, I mean, like, the guy is a wizard. Like, I had like a general sense of what this scene was in my head, and like I sent him excerpts from the book, like 2 paragraphs basically of just description, and then he was like, all right, yep, that sounds good, I'll work on this one. And like 3 days later it comes back and it just looks incredible. Like, it's almost done. Like, his first drafts are way better than my first drafts. So yeah, he was just like, it was pretty much perfect right away. We went back and forth like a couple small items, like adding the note in the character's hand and the color of his clothes, things like that. And even after I was happy with it, Felix like kept tweaking it a little bit, and it got better every single time. And I was like, yeah, just keep going if you want to, but I know eventually you got to work on your next project or whoever your next client is. So yeah, I mean, Felix is an absolute joy to work with, and I'm super happy he agreed to work with me again on the sequel, Sibling Sons 2. So I cannot wait to see what he cooks up next time. Yeah, I think that's about it for this question. Thanks for asking that, Jackie. All right, on to question number 2. Nope, that's not the right tab. There it is. What was your writing process for this book like? Idea to final draft. So this is from my friend Liz. She's in my writing group. And if I scroll down here, I shall come to the video prepared for this one. I've failed to do this. Yeah, like I was saying before, I'm not good at speaking extemporaneously, and I decided that I'm just going to wing it. I have not even read these questions. I forget what most of them are. So this is like off the cuff you're getting here. This is unfiltered thoughts. So, what was the writing process for this book like? It's kind of hard to remember to some extent, because I've been working on it for 3 years. And thinking back to like 3 years ago, actually, at this point, almost 4 years ago. Definitely more than 4 years ago. I think I started writing it in November 2018. And originally, it started just as a collection of notes, essentially, from my friends and my D&D campaign. My friend was the DM. I was just one of the characters in the party. His name was Grim, and he is the main character of the book. And yeah, it started off with me just like typing a lot of notes. I was basically just trying to get good at taking notes in work meetings, and I was like, D&D's good practice for that. Like, I have to write down everything that happens, almost like a courtroom stenographer or something like that. And by the time like we finished the campaign, or this like arc of the campaign that makes up An Ocean of Others, I was basically typing like word for word every single thing that happened in the campaign. It was nuts, way too much effort. It's like everybody else just writing like little notes, handwritten, and being just more like present with the story, which I feel like is or not the story, but just the story and the session and like the friends and like just being more present rather than just like typing away. I think that's definitely the way to go. That's what I try to do these days. But yeah, it started off as just a collection of notes, and then eventually I got to like the end of the campaign, and I was like, I'm going to clean up these notes a little bit. Actually, sorry, we weren't even at the end of the campaign. This was like mid-campaign I started doing this. And yeah, it just turned out to be something I really enjoyed doing. I was like, all right, I'm going to write a backstory for my character. And that ended up being like chapter 1 of the book, of the first draft. It was terrible. It was horrendous. One of the worst things I've ever read. Yeah, I still have it. I'm thinking about sharing that first draft maybe one day, but no time soon. Maybe after the after the whole trilogy's published. Yeah, so went from those just like notes, started cleaning them up, trying to like novelize them and share it as a way to get everybody else in the story and in the campaign like reading it and more interested in reading my notes, because before they were just like bullet points, just line by line. Here's what happened. Someone said this happened, etc. And I would just like finish a chapter, which generally corresponded to like one session of the D&D campaign, and then I would post it on our Discord in like a PDF and put it up on Google Drive, and people could read it if they wanted to. I have no idea if anybody read these in the campaign. Probably not, because by the end of it, there was like, I want to say 80,000 words or something like that. So it was like full novel length. And then I finished all that up. I ended up having to like wait to start the second draft until after the campaign was finished. So like I actually got ahead of where we were in the story, or like I caught up, I guess. And I had to wait until like what happened. And actually, because of I sort of like knew where the story was going in the book, I used that to like influence my decisions in the upcoming sessions, and then ended up being able to write those into the story so that it made more sense. It was like more consistent. But yeah, I think that was fun. And then I started the second draft. But first, because this was all just like completely pantsed and like none of it was planned out, there was no outline or anything, I first did like a reverse outline, just going through, and I started at the very last chapter and just worked backwards to like note down all of the plot threads and like all of the character beats and everything, and created that all the way going back to chapter 1. Found that there's like all kinds of disconnects and everything, places where it just got inconsistent, or like plot lines were dropped, or plot lines were just introduced randomly and needed like more foreshadowing and preparation. And that was really useful, because then with that outline I was able to see that like, all right, this story has a structure, obviously, and I need to completely fix this structure. It was very messed up at first. So yeah, that was basically the goal of the second draft, was to make it more consistent and try and tighten up the prose a little bit. And by this time, I'd pretty much decided like I'm going to go through and actually turn this into a book. And I didn't know I was going to self-publish or try and query it or whatever at that point, but I knew that it was something I wanted to get good at, was writing books. And I'd had stories in my head just kind of like percolating, but I knew they were too hard for me to write. So this was meant to be like a practice book. And now here it is like the first book as in my writing career. So yeah, it ended up being very good practice. I took it very seriously and tried to learn as much as I could about storytelling and craft and just all of the process things like marketing and just all the other things you need to do as a self-published author. But yeah, so second draft finished. Third draft, I didn't rewrite the outline. I was like, all right, it's time to just like go through and like tighten this up, tighten up the prose, cut out unnecessary stuff. I always do revision guides in between each revision. So like I had a list of things that I needed to fix, and those are broken up into like major revisions, things that are going to like span across the story or multiple chapters maybe, or just like a full character's arc, versus like minor revisions, which are like, all right, in this chapter, like this part doesn't really make sense. It doesn't work with the magic system or whatever. So yeah, I had that list. I went through that for the third draft, and after that, it was just a matter of like sticking to my revision guide, making the changes, just making this a better story, tightening it all up. And at that point, I was like, all right, I need to actually reach out and find an editor. And like I'd learned more about the process just by listening to writing podcasts, and like I think I took the Neil Gaiman master class about craft and everything. So I knew I needed to not only learn a lot more, but also I needed help. And for NaNoWriMo that year, I took that very seriously, got very active in the NaNoWriMo community, which was actually how I met Liz here, and got invited to their writing group. And that was super helpful. So they helped me, they being Liz and everybody else in the writing group, helped me like figure out the beginning to the story, like make it a little bit easier to like onboard as a reader. Kind of like soften the learning curve a little bit, because it was pretty steep at first, and it just kind of started right away, just like in the agency, and I won't say any more than that. Basically what is chapter 3 now, or maybe even chapter 4, was chapter 1 before, so I ended up having to like tack on a couple chapters at the beginning. But then I ended up taking a class at a local college, just online, in the middle of the pandemic. I was like, this is a good thing to do with my time. And it was a very good thing to do with my time, because the professor for that class was Stacy Kukorik, who ended up editing this book for me. She was an editor telling us all about the self-publishing process. And she's the reason I decided to self-publish the book. And I mean, who better to help me edit it than someone who I already had a bit of a relationship with, and who I already knew. And I knew she was going to be good, because like the class that she taught, she went above and beyond every single lecture. Like it was a small class, so she could really like focus on helping each student. I think there was only like 3 of us by the end. So yeah, she was phenomenal. She was great. And luckily for me, she's also agreed to edit the next book. So it's basically going to be the same team for Sibling Sons 2, which I'm super excited about. And yeah, after that, it was just like a lot of back and forth with Stacy, just incorporating her notes. She gave me such good feedback. I think every single thing that she suggested, I accepted, and the book is so much better for that. That said, the book is going to be, well, it could have been even better if I knew what I was doing from the beginning. But, you know, this is a writing or a learning process. So the way I see it is like I started off not knowing at all what I was doing. With this draft, I barely even knew that it was going to be a book. And by the end, I've decided like I want to write for the rest of my life, basically. And I want to take this very seriously. So yeah, I guess the goal is just every book should be better and better and better than the last one. So I know I'm kind of rambling a bit here, and we got 15 more questions to get through. So I'll cut it off there. There's more info about what my writing process was just on my website, joshsc.com. I've got all kinds of essays and things just with the thoughts that went into world building and the publishing process, and like how I converted a D&D campaign into a book, all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested in that, you can go check that out. And I'll have the link down in the description. All right, next question from the Shaggy Shepherd Book Reviews. How long have you had the idea for this in your head before you started giving into it and writing it down? Was it an instant, hey, this needs to be a book, or did you stew over it forever before getting started? I responded to the tweet, great question. Neither of those is right, though. So as you've just heard, yeah, it wasn't a book that was like in my head for a long time before I started writing it. There is one of those that's still percolating up there and will probably be the next series I write after Sibling Sons is wrapped up. Or before I started. Wait, sorry. Was an instant, hey, does this need to be a book, or did you stew over it forever? Yeah, so no real stewing over it. I kind of answered this in the last question, I guess. Just like, yeah, it started as a D&D campaign, and I didn't even realize it was going to be a book that I've ended up publishing. I was like, yeah, this is going to be a practice book for the real book that I write. And I've actually told that to my wife, and she thinks it's really funny that it is not a practice book at all at this point. It is a fully published book, and trying to market it properly and everything. And I mean, I guess, every book is a practice book in a way, if you're just trying to get better and better. So yeah, it wasn't an instant, hey, this needs to be a book. It didn't even really start as my idea. A lot of the foundations of the plot and the story were my DM's idea. But I definitely like twisted it and made it my own. And he and I have talked about that and just how different I've taken that, in terms of like, so we never actually finished the story, in his campaign. So I ended up having to like write an ending to this and like plotting out the sequel. So like the sequels are all my own invention and pretty much have nothing to do with what he was leading towards. But yeah, we both had very, very different takes on this. And part of that comes from the fact that as a player, he was trying to keep a lot of secrets from us, or from me. And so I didn't really know where things were going or how things worked, or like how the magic system worked, stuff like that. So yeah, I didn't stew on it for long before getting started. I just kind of like started writing it, and I guess it's closer to what Shaggy Shepherd here says as, hey, this needs to be a book. I didn't expect it to be a book, but that's what I ended up doing. So I'm happy I did that. All right. Good question, though. I feel like that is how a lot of people end up getting into writing, is like they have an idea that they're stewing on for a long time, and they're like, all right, I need to get this out of my head and onto paper. And then you end up turning that into a book. Or just like starting on something, like having a stroke of genius, and just like inspiration hits, the muse it strikes, and the words start flowing out like instantly. Yeah, that'd be nice. I'm definitely more of a stew over it though, for just my other ideas. Good question. All right, Troy Knowlton, another author. He asks, haven't read your novel yet, but I'd like to participate, so here's a silly question. Coke or Pepsi? Disclaimer, diet/zero versions are in play. Okay. I forgot that there were going to be like non-book and writing related questions. Coke or Pepsi? Yeah, I'm not really someone who has like a strong brand loyalty to like almost any brand. I'll generally just like, I'll accept either, like whichever one is available. It's fine for me. I'm not really a soda drinker anymore. Now that I've hit the ripe old age of 30, anytime I have any sugar, my brain just shuts down. Like I just get a headache. I feel tired and weighed down, and it's not good. I remember, when was this? Like just before or just after New Year's this year, I was hanging out at my friend's house, and there was Pepsi and there was water upstairs, but I didn't feel like going upstairs, so I just like poured myself like a tiny cup of Pepsi, like this much Pepsi in like a red Solo cup, and I drank that, and it like nearly knocked me out. It was it was a horrible experience. I felt awful afterwards, like just like so much syrup and sugar. So my answer is neither. I don't like Coke or Pepsi generally these days. Much more of just a water drinker. Almost every video I do, I have just like one of these guys here. Not just when filming videos, just all the time. I've got these, what are they, 32 ounce water bottles, and I just have like two of them, and I'll fill one up, drink it all, or I'll fill it up, put it in the fridge, have that one cold, pull out the other one, and it's just like I'll drink that one, fill it up, put it back, and I'm just like doing the swapping thing, so I can always just have cold water, because that's the true best drink, cold water. Yeah. Sorry, it's a rambling response about Coke or Pepsi. All right, what is the future of fantasy as a genre, and what place do indie books have in it? From Michael Roberti. Roberti? I'm sorry, man. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Man, this is like such a deep question after Coke or Pepsi. What is the future of fantasy as a genre? I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that question because, that fantasy and just that whatever genre, any genre really, is kind of just decided by just the collective, right? Like where we all as a collective have decided to go. And really what I see the future of fantasy being as like, whereas before with traditionally published outlets, it's like, these companies are trying to make money and they want to make sure that there's a market for the books that they're publishing. So try to think this through as I say it. So they're going to pick things that are like tried and true. They're not going to experiment quite as much. And that's fine. Like there's a lot of like any tried and true, like well-tread ground can still be done well. And I think that's what a lot of publishing houses have tried to do in the past. But I think these days, because indie books are flourishing so much, it's so much easier to self-publish, like with the internet, and there's so many more resources available for indie authors. I basically see the genre as like sort of going from this like narrow road to just like blooming out in every conceivable direction. And I think that's great because like fantasy and science fiction and just like all speculative fiction is about just like new ideas and finding new ways to experience consciousness and just express yourself, I guess. So yeah, just I see it very much more just diverse in every meaning of that word. Just yeah, like almost like a flower blooming out. And that's the image that keeps coming up in my head as I'm thinking about this. And I think the place that indie books play is really important because that's kind of like it's showing that these new ideas are viable before publishers, like the big publishers, are like willing to go down that route. And I think they do take note of those kind of things. And you see it when like books like Evan Winter's The Rage of Dragons or Travis Baldry's Legends and Lattes, where like they're doing something new and they're telling a story that is pretty unique, and it does really well. It's like it shows that there's an appetite for those kind of things, and then the big publishers kind of like swoop in and they're willing to like pick them up and help them write more books like that. Like they're trying to say like, okay, yeah, like we can go down this route as well, and I think that's a beautiful thing. So yeah, the future of fantasy as a genre, I feel like it's going to be much bigger, just like not quite as narrow as it was before. And I mean, it already is like in that, it already is much more broad and diverse than it was even like 20 years ago. And I think that's only going to continue. Yeah. So I think, I think the future of fantasy is bright. That's a deep question. I'm going to have a serious ponder before I answer this one. Oof. Can you tell I did not have a serious ponder? I had to ponder mid-answer. It's difficult. All right. Great question, though. Next, from Brittany Cotton. I have 2 questions. Please excuse me. I'm still learning. What is an AMA? That's a good question, actually. That is an Ask Me Anything. And can I ask them through DM? She could ask as a DM. Oh wait, hold on. I should have read all this stuff. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. maybe I should have led with this question. What is an AMA? AMA is Ask Me Anything. So literally, just ask me anything, and I will answer it. I will still count you as part of the giveaway. All right. Question from Craig Bookworm. Do you have an outline of the series in your head / written down? Like how many books it will be, and how do you think it will end? I don't really have an outline. I'm really trying to wrap this up in 3 books, but the place that I see the books ending is very clear in my head. Like I know exactly how it's going to end. I knew that pretty much after writing the 3rd draft of An Ocean of Others, and I wrote that down. So I'm glad I have like at least the ending location to refer to, and make sure I'm like still on track. But I don't have it all as like a solid outline. I have a collection of lots of notes and ideas, but you know, like I feel like I change as a person just in between each book. So like where I was when I started An Ocean of Others, I'm a very different person now. And when I started Sibling Sons too. So I feel like a little bit of that gets reflected in just like the themes and the writing. And so, yeah, I feel like I know the end direction. I just don't know all of like the stops I'm going to make along the way, I guess. And I think there's pros and cons to that. Like if I did have just a solid series outline, then I would feel much more confident that I'm going to be able to finish it in 3 books, and that like the overall story structure is good. The cons are that it's like a little bit more, I don't know, restrictive in a way. I mean, it's not really restrictive because I can just change things at any point. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this one, I don't have an outline, but for the next series, I think I would like to take the time and do an outline up front. Part of the reason I don't have an outline is like because I said it started as a D&D campaign. I didn't know where the story was going until after it was written, and I like retroactively made it into a story, almost like a publishable story. So yeah, I sort of like pantsed that one. And when I say pantsed, I mean like it's kind of like NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, which happens every November. That's NaNoWriMo jargon, where people say they're a pantser or a planner. And pantser is someone who just like flies by the seat of their pants, basically. They don't have a plan. They just write and try and get as much done. Versus a planner who's like, I've got an outline, I'm sticking to it. And I definitely feel like I am more in my core an outliner. That said, I did not outline enough of this book. So yeah, there may be things that are like structurally kind of weird. I definitely outlined like all of Sibling Sons 2 before I started writing, and I'll do the same for the 3rd one. I just don't have like a full series outline. But I think for the next series I do. I definitely will. I think that's a really good idea. It'll jive better for me in my writing. And yeah, how many books it will be and how it will end. I really want it to finish in 3, but it may be 4. If it does end up being 4, I think that's okay. It's just there's a lot that's going to need to go into book 3. It might be a longer book than the other 2, but we'll see. I'll figure that out as I'm outlining it. See if I can get to the end, or if I feel like I need to kind of like set another stopping point that makes more sense. I have a feeling I'll be able to finish it in 3, though. Good question, Craig. All right, Jametti, what made you choose Felix Ortiz over other artists? And I responded, other artists? There are others? Yeah, Felix Ortiz, he's just phenomenal. He was my first choice because I read Blood of the Spear by Mark Timoney, very good epic fantasy book, and I just really liked that cover. So I looked into his portfolio, just Felix Ortiz and Sean T. King. They work together quite often, and I was just blown away by every single thing that they did. So I feel like it was a pretty easy choice. there's obviously so many talented artists out there, but for me, I don't know. It's like it's hard to define exactly why I like Felix's stuff so much, but like I don't know, I connect with it. I feel like it's very character focused, but he's so um, he's just so versatile. Like it seems like he can do like any style, and it just works every single time. So he's just phenomenal. So I'm glad that he chose to work with me again for the sequel, and hopefully he will for the third book too. Yeah, he's got something. He's incredibly talented. All right, from John A. Douglas. What horror media, books, games, movies, etc., did you draw on to come up with the horrific imagery that came about in your story? So, horrific imagery. Yeah, John has. I watched his review of my book, which was a really good review. He's very thoughtful, and one of the things he liked a lot was just like the horror elements that are included in this book. And I think a lot of the reason I decided to include horror elements is because I really like the dreariness of horror as a genre. I don't know, something about those vibes just they work for me. Like I just like those dark elements in a story. Like thinking about some of my favorite franchises or series of all time, like the top three are probably Dark Souls, Berserk, and Game of Thrones. And none of those are known for being like uplifting, cheery stories. So I don't know if that speaks to some like brokenness within me or what, because I'm generally a pretty happy guy, I would say. Yeah, I don't know. They touch me in a way that I feel like a lot of other stories don't really, like they resonate. And so I wanted to have some of that in my games too, or in my books too. So yeah, I included a lot of horror elements, and part of that also came from the fact that there was horrific monster fight type things in the D&D campaign. So I knew that if I was going to do those right, and if it was going to be authentic, that it needed to be kind of a horrific style that I wrote those scenes in, because like if you're faced with this almost like Lovecraftian monster, and I'm not saying my monsters are like Lovecraftian completely or anything like that, but like if you're a normal person, which I think my main character is, then if you come up against like a horrific monster, like you're gonna be shitting your pants. You're not gonna know what to do or like how to defend yourself. You're gonna feel like you are just completely out of your depth and there's nothing you can do to survive here. And like that's how I wanted my character to react to these types of things. So what did I draw upon to come up with the horrific imagery? I think probably those visual mediums are the ones that probably most influenced my things, or my horror elements. So like, yeah, the monsters in like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, and the demons in Berserk. Like, I definitely drew a little bit on those things. I always try to like make them my own thing, and not just like straight up copy what another artist has done. So yeah, I think those two are probably like the main sources, like Dark Souls / Bloodborne, just like any FromSoft stuff, and Berserk, just because they resonate so deeply with me. But what's interesting is like I didn't even get into horror until like very recently. I until like even after college, I was like, I don't know, horror just, it seems kind of shallow, and the characters are always just doing stupid things, and like I'm not like a fan of like slasher movies or anything like that. And yeah, I don't know, I just never really liked them, and I always thought they were poorly written. But now all of a sudden I'm writing fantasy with horror elements. I've got a sci-fi horror story which is influenced a little bit by like Alien, Um, so I don't know how that came about. Did like a total 180 in my opinions on horror and dark media like that. So yeah, I would say those are the ones. Let me think. Man, I would go into more detail with this if this was a spoiler AMA, because I like to talk about the specific influences behind like each element in particular. I'm trying to phrase this carefully to not spoil anything. I've probably already spoiled a little bit, but I'm someone who tends to not really care about spoilers that much. But I know a lot of people do care about that, so I'm trying to be considerate. Anyway, pineapple on pizza, yay or nay? Yay. Definitely yay. I will be taking no further questions. Video games. You into them? If yes, what's your favorite one of all time? Oh, yes. I'm definitely into video games. Favorite of all time is probably the Dark Souls series. Really, just anything From Software does is probably my favorite. Like, whatever their latest game is, that's my favorite. Elden Ring, loved it. Like, a totally unmatched experience, in my opinion. Like, one of the absolute best games I've ever played. And it's like a game where I don't even understand the story going through it, and yet it still, like, evokes such emotion in me. I don't understand how they do that. It's like magic. But yeah, just any difficult game is what I like, where you're sort of like challenged as a player. It doesn't hold your hand. You have to learn things and get better at the game and learn how to play it properly. And then when you finally overcome these challenges, like, your heart is racing and you just feel incredible. And oh man, it just makes you feel like glorious. Like, I love that feeling. And that is, every single FromSoft game has managed to evoke that feeling in me. So they're absolutely my favorite developer. There's a lot of other great games too. Like, I like the new God of War series, written really well. I haven't played Ragnarok yet. I definitely need to get around to that. The Halo series has been pretty influential. I have so many good memories of just me and my best friends playing Halo, just sitting on the couch playing co-op. Great stuff. Yeah, I'd say those are my favorites. All right. We've been going for 42 minutes now. I'm trying to keep this maybe like around an hour. I don't want it to get too long. What book do you recommend someone should read at least once in their lifetime? What book should someone read? I don't know. That's a hard one, because every person is different. So, like, even a book that I would say made like a big impact on me, like, it might not be for everybody, and it might hit them like completely wrong for whatever reason. What book should someone read? I think, all right, I feel like I gotta like pick a person, like a type of person. I have to have someone in mind to make this recommendation to. So, like, I think someone should read The Lord of the Rings probably at least once in their lifetime, especially if they're a fantasy lover. Like, I mean, if they're a fantasy lover, they probably already have, though, right? It's so influential. Like, everybody knows Tolkien and The Lord of the Rings. Ah, man, do I have any more interesting answers? Let me look at my bookshelf over here. Oh man. Yeah, I feel like there's nothing really sticking out to me as like a solid, like, everyone should definitely read this. Depends on what you're into, you know? Like, if you like history books, the Gulag Archipelago was really moving and kind of horrifying in a lot of ways. So, like, a lot of good history there about Soviet Russia and like the atrocities committed. There's like Mouse is a good one if you're into graphic novels, and you want to learn some horrible history. um, Horrible, not in like the story is horrible or like it's written horribly, but in just like obviously the atrocities committed. Just it's almost incomprehensible that humans could do that to each other, but humans have a lot of problems. Or if you're into fantasy, Lord of the Rings is another great one. If you're into sci-fi, I would say you should read Foundation by Isaac Asimov. Incredible series, one of my favorites. If you're into yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's all I read. It's fantasy and sci-fi and occasionally like nonfiction. Ah, man. Last year I noticed I've only read 3 nonfiction books, and I feel like that is troubling. I need to read a lot more nonfiction. I need to keep learning. Never let yourself stop learning. So, good question, DM Anthony. It's a really hard one to answer, though. I'm gonna cop out and say everybody should read The Lord of the Rings. It's fantastic. And if you don't like reading, just watch the movies because they're great too. What was the hardest part of writing the book? It says DM Kurt. All right. Oh, and he added down below, and the easiest? Okay, so I'd say the easiest part of writing the book was world building for me. Yeah, world building just comes really natural to me. I don't know why. It's, I mean, a lot of people will probably say that same thing, that like they have no trouble world building, because like world building is like there's just this flurry of ideas in your head, and you're just like grabbing all of them and putting the cool ones down, and then like trying to work out like all of the implications. Like if this is true and this is true, then like together they can result in this other awesome thing that I'll use in my book, and it's super fun. And that's why world builder's disease occurs, is because it's so much fun to do world building that you could just do that forever. Like there really is no end point to world building. You like, just like reality, like reality is like fractal. There's never a stopping point. You'll never stop learning if you want to just keep looking into the implications of things and figuring out how the world works. And it's impossible to know it all. And so if you're creating a world that is sufficiently real feeling and has enough depth, it's the same kind of thing. Like you can just do it forever and never run out of interesting things to write about. But you got to stop at some point. And the hardest part of writing the book, I would say, is stopping and realizing that it needs to be about characters, right? You have this world, but now you need living, breathing, real characters in them that we can relate to, and that are going to drive the story, obviously. And characters, unlike world building, are really hard for me. Like, I don't know. I think it might just be a matter of like I need to do more reading, but like character interiority and writing emotions on the page, I find that stuff really challenging for whatever reason. Maybe it's because it's just like I've lived a sheltered life, and I'm not in touch with all of my emotions or something like that. And so writing characters who are in touch with their emotions, or characters who have emotions and are not in touch with them, it's just very challenging. And I think that's one area that I could have significantly improved in the first book, is just like the character relationships and getting their emotions and their interiority onto the page and making them feel much more real. And I hope I'm doing better at that now, especially with Grave of the Waiting. I think I'm doing a much better job with character interiority. And with Sibling Sons 2, even my first draft now has so much more emotion and character depth than even the published version of An Ocean of Others. So I think it's something I'm improving on, but it's so hard. It's so difficult. But I think that's why, as readers, we love when someone pulls that off so well. Like, I know as a writer, I recognize how hard that is. And so when someone can really get me into their character's head and like even even if I disagree with their choices, I understand them and I see what they're going through and I sympathize and I empathize, and the like it draws the emotions out of you almost like unwillingly. I like it's magical. Like something about that is just so challenging, but it's what makes reading worthwhile, for sure. So yeah, that's definitely the hardest part of the book. And it might not be that way for everybody, but it is for me for sure. Great question. All right, Matt. I haven't read your books. What would you tell me to convince me to pick one up? Um, okay. I've actually already answered this question. I basically just told him that uh, there's this guy, Centix, the lovable scar dwarf weirdo. When he's not bashing skulls, he's tenderly asking overworked nurses if they're okay. Mostly he just grunts. But there's more to the eye than meets this fellow. Yeah, there's a I have a couple non-human races in my book. One is scar dwarves. They are like stone men, sort of like golems, but um, yeah, not exactly. They're pretty close to golems though. But yeah, one of the main characters is Santix, this scar dwarf, and I love him. He's one of my favorite characters, and I think some readers have resonated with him, even though he barely says anything. Like when he speaks in like very stilted, like 3 words. That's his whole sentence, and most of the time, like he grunts, and that's it. That's how he emotes. But I don't know, something about him. He's just so lovable. I have another non-human race called Peekers. They are like insectoid creatures. They're like telepathic ants, and they're really interesting. I'm doing a lot more. I did a lot more world building for them for book 2, because we're going to be visiting the Peeker hometown, home city area. Excuse me, called the Peeker Mounds, and so yes, there will be some very interesting things with the Peekers in book 2. All right, good question. What are some of your favorite fantasy books? Which book would you say inspired you to write An Ocean of Others? Okay, some of my favorite fantasy books. Definitely, I would say my number one is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Um, yeah, just something about Kaladin's character arc in that story was just, yeah, it was phenomenal, and just like the pacing of that 1100-page book just never let up for the entire time. It was like, it felt like it was so fast paced. I read it in like a week or something, which was really fast for me. I'm a pretty slow reader, so I mean it put Brandon Sanderson on my radar reading that book, and I've read every single one of his books since. So I would say that definitely did a number on me. It definitely left an impression. Other than that, I love the Game of Thrones series, The Song of Ice and Fire. Just some of the deepest characters, and also some of the most like heartbreaking moments in books, which of course a lot of us know now from this TV show, and the horrible way it ended. But yeah, I like, even if he never finishes his series, it's still a masterpiece to me. Like even his books that are not as well loved, like books 4 and 5, I still think they're incredible. So those are definitely up there. What else? My favorite fantasy books in particular. I feel like I gotta look over here at my shelves. Oh yeah, of course. How could I forget Joe Abercrombie? His books, they're just like filled with such wit and such darkness, but the characters are so good. Yeah, man, like some of the best character work, and I'm trying to include that in uh, trying to include some lessons I've learned from reading Joe Abercrombie in my books now, which is like just trying to include a layer of humor in the writing, and just like witticism that keeps it from being too dark while also being unforgivingly brutal. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that combination just works really well for me. It's something I'd like to emulate in my writing. But also, I love the way that I love how he switches character POVs, and you could omit all of the characters' names in his POVs, and you'd still know like that it's a different character. You'd know who it was. Like the writing style changes with his POV, and I think that's so effective. And I'm trying to do that for Sibling Sons too, where yeah, like it each character has just like a completely distinguishable voice from the other ones, so that even like as you switch back and forth between chapters and things like that, like you're never lost. You know instantly that you've switched POVs and this is a new character, even if you like omitted the third person name or whatever. Yeah, so those are probably my top three series, just like the Stormlight Archive, um, A Song of Ice and Fire, and The First Law. And I still need to read so much more Joe Abercrombie because he's incredible, and I've only read 4 of his books. Which of those would I say inspired me to write An Ocean of Others? Yeah, so like I said, it was more inspired by the D&D campaign, like the plot and the story and everything, and the characters, obviously, who are just my friends in disguise. My friends playing characters in disguise. But in terms of like what inspired me to write, it probably has to be a Game of Thrones. Like that is the book that got me back into fantasy and back into reading consistently. Because for a long period of my life, between like age 13 and probably like 25, 26, I just did not read at all. Or like I read for school and I hated it. And I missed out on a lot of great books, is what I'm saying. And then all of a sudden I discover a Game of Thrones, and I was just completely enamored by it. Got me into reading fantasy consistently, and it was just like so well written. I was like, I want to try my hand at this. Like, I'll never be as good as George R. R. Martin, I told myself, but you know, like you can't just judge yourself against already established amazing authors. You got to start somewhere and build your way up. So, yeah, I think that is how I got into writing. Yeah, that is all of the Twitter questions that I have here. But I did get 2 by email because I solicited some more questions in my latest newsletter. So I can pull these up here. So Dom from Dominish Books asks, what's the one thing you would do differently if you could go back in time and have your publishing debut all over again? Ooh. The one thing I would do differently if I could go back in time and have my publishing debut all over again. Yeah, that's a really difficult question because I think I've been very lucky with my debut in terms of how well it's gone. I feel like the fact that Felix and Sean worked on the cover really drew a lot of eyeballs to it, because they do such amazing work. I always say that I attribute like 90% of my book's success to them. Like, you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but it should still have an amazing cover, right? And so I've been very lucky on that front, and I feel like I did a lot of research into like marketing and trying to figure out how to get the book into people's hands. And I mean, like, I don't know what my latest like Amazon rankings and everything like that are, but I think I'm over like 2,000 some books out there at this point, and a lot of those were given away for free. But like, that's my book in 2,000 people's hands, so I'm totally okay with that. I'm not doing this to try and like make a ton of money. Like, it's a nice thing if the book makes money, and it's like a little supplemental income for me, which all just goes right back into publishing because publishing is very expensive. But yeah, I don't know. There's a quote from Brandon Sanderson, or like an interview, where he was saying that he was in the middle of trying to query his first books, and I think it was 13 books in before one of them finally got bought by a publishing house, which was Elantris, I believe. And he had to really seriously question why he was doing this. And his answer to that question really resonates with me too, which is that, like, it's really not about the money. It's just about writing as a way to express myself, and because I think it makes me better as a person. And I mean, for me, I don't I'm not very good at speaking. I often feel like the words kind of like get caught in my throat, or like I will have a clear idea up in my head, and then it like gets lost in translation on the way out my mouth. But whereas writing, I can almost like directly take what's up here and get it onto the page. And it doesn't always work, but it works way more consistently than when I am just speaking and talking. Um, and that's why I love writing, is because I feel like it is a much more, I don't even know how to say it. Just like it's so much easier to express myself in writing than it is in uh, in verbal form. So like if I never sold another book, I would still keep writing, because I feel like it's good for me. It's like it's good for my mental health. It's good for like maintaining stability in my life and a schedule, and always being creative and learning and absorbing new ideas, and engaging with a community. And like there's just so many benefits even if no one buys my books. I try to give away most of my books. I don't. I just want people to read it, and just to have it and get it out there. Because hopefully, if it if the book and the story works for me, hopefully it works for some other people, and it will, I don't know, provide them with a couple hours of entertainment. That's the most I could do. Anyway, I didn't answer the question here. So what's the one thing I would do if I could do it all over again? I think I would just wait longer, because especially for my first novel, there's basically no deadline, right? Um, it's it's almost like I was just like antsy to start putting things out there and like learning the process, and I think it's good that I did that, but I think I could have probably learned more and written a couple more drafts before sending it to the editor, or before sending it to my editor, that I don't know, would have just made the book better. But at the same point, or at the same time, I also realized that like no book is going to be perfect, and if I had that mindset forever, I could have just kept rewriting and revising and revising and revising over and over again, and it could be like 5 years later and I still don't have anything out, and now I've not learned about all these other things. So there's opportunity costs. I would say I don't regret very much here. Like even the mistakes I made, that's how you learn. You're never going to get it right the first try. So if I could go back in time and do one thing all over again, most likely I wouldn't change anything. But if I had to pick an answer, I'd do one more draft. All right. And the final question from Krina from A Maze of Words. What are 3 words that you use to describe your series, and 5 random objects that you associate with your series? This is a really hard one. What would that be? 3 words. I would say brains, monsters, and oh, it's so hard. I feel like brains and monsters is the easiest, or the easy ones. I guess darkness. I don't know. Like one of the themes is just like light and dark, which is kind of like overdone, I guess, at this point. But I've gone into why I chose to include light and dark as a theme in the essays that I've written. But 5 random objects that I associate with my series. All right, I'm going to say that a website is an object, and there's a website I use all the time when writing called Brain FM. That is the only website and the only music I listen to when writing. I listen to Brain FM. It's a music site with a timer. That's all I need. And it's all just like background noise, so it's perfect. So there's that site. I can hear certain songs from that site and just instantly be transported back into like writing my second or third draft. It's kind of freaky sometimes how strong those associations are, especially because back when I was doing that, they only had like 5 songs, so it was like the same 5 songs on repeat. They've greatly expanded now, so there's a lot more that I can listen to. So that's one random object, is that website. Another object that I associate with it is, I would say like a D20. I have a couple D20 that I used when playing the D&D campaign. And there's a moment in the book that purely came about because I rolled a natural 1 and critically failed an attack roll. So with that in mind, you might be able to spot that moment in the book. It's a pretty consequential moment. Actually, there might be 2 now that I'm thinking about it, but one of them is more consequential than the other, I would say, in terms of Grimm's character development. What else? Other objects I associate with the book. I would say probably I bought like a little 3D model for my character, which is Grimm. Actually, you know what? I probably have that right over here. Where is it? Actually, I don't think I have it. I think it's at my friend's house, probably with our character sheets and everything. Although he just moved across the to like the Midwest, so I might never see those again if he still has them. What else? 5 random objects I associate with my series. I mean, I gotta associate the book with the series, right? That's a random object. And the sun. I associate the sun with the series. It's called the Dance of the Sibling Suns. There's 2 suns. So yeah, I would say those are the 5 or 4. I don't know if I said enough things, but I don't want to linger on it for too long. It's a very difficult question, surprisingly. I thought this was going to be an easy one. That's what happens when you don't prepare for things, folks. But I think that's all the questions I got. I can check real quick. I see I've got a couple Twitter notifications. Oh, that's very nice of John A. Douglas. Said I'm live on YouTube. Drop into chat and ask some questions. The man is a great writer. That's very, very kind of you, John. Very, very kind. I would say I'm not a great writer. I'm an okay writer. All right, so I guess that means the last step here is we're doing a giveaway. So I'll show you how I do that. Basically, all I do, I've got a spreadsheet here of everybody who asked a question. There were 17 people, and I've got a random number generator. So if I set the max to 17, then basically whatever number comes up here in the list here, that's who's going to win the free book. So let's see who it is. 10. Number 10. That is Pippin. Pippin wins a free book. That's exciting. Where are you, Pippin? Where are you? Pippin took the Shire Hobbit for asking if I like pineapple on pizza. He has won a free book. Fantastic. All right, so I will DM him right after I wrap up here. But that's going to do it. Thank you all for watching this rambly completely unprepared live stream for an AMA. I am probably going to do the same thing for a spoiler-filled discussion, and this time I will actually try and film it or do the live stream in the month that I said I was going to do it. So, he needs an answer. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you had a good time watching it, and I will see you next time. Take it easy.